one of the scariest builds out there for the Zerg players right now. And as a result, something that you want to be using as a Protoss player. It is the 2 Oracle into 12 Gladept PvZ timing. Of course, Gladept, just a fancy way of throwing glaive and adept together. These are the adepts that have been in the gym. They've been working out and their biceps are ready to toss those spiked frisbees as hard as they possibly can and hopefully just destroy their opponent. Hello guys, welcome to the PiG Daily. Today's going to be a very quick one. We're just doing a quick build order walkthrough. Something nice and easy for me to throw together. And of course, I haven't loaded up my in-game scene yet, so I'm going to leave the camera on me for about 3 more seconds while that loads. And now, let's go in. So what are we talking about, guys? We're talking about already being very annoying in a game of StarCraft, opening 2 Oracles. If you haven't been watching a lot of Pro StarCraft in the current meta, basically all any pro does in PvZ is build Oracles like 70-80% of their games. 1 or 2 Oracle openings are just the norm right now because they get a lot of scouting, they potentially do damage, and then from then on in the mid-game they can put Revelation on the Zerg army. They see everything that's going on. And yeah, and then they start to add stasis traps everywhere, which really crush a lot of Zerg attacks. Makes it very awkward for Zerg. So the important part here is you've opened up Oracles, and then holy shit, you have 12 glaive adepts hitting it just 6 minutes, running in and absolutely annihilating your opponents. This, of course, is a replay from Neeb versus Nerchio in the grand finals of WCS Austin, held recently over there in Texas. And Neeb did end up winning this finals 4-2. Spoiler alert, the finals was like 2 weeks ago, so yeah, don't really care about spoilers too much. Nerchio was caught with his pants down, wasn't quite ready for this one, was trying to go up to things like Hydralisks and really high drone counts. The Oracles had also done a good little bit of damage to his workers, so he just really was not ready, and Neeb tore him apart. So now I've showed you guys the damage, the brutality of hitting it this timing. Let's go back. Let's walk through the actual build order. The brutality. So you're going to be opening up with a rather typical opening. However, and you can definitely do this off a gate first. However, in this particular game, Neeb's going to go Nexus first. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So it's Nexus, Gate, and then Probe Scout. Now, this is obviously very risky against something like a 12 pull, especially if it was a different map. On this map, you've only got this tiny choke point. It's very easy to pull probes and defend, or even to wall it off completely and defend. And that's why Neeb can get away with this, because it's very unlikely that the Zerg player is actually going to respond to that with any sort of crazy aggression. Well, not even respond. The Zerg doesn't have time to respond. The Zerg would need to choose to go for one of those rushes blindly, and choosing to do those on this map is just a massive gamble. So in this case, Neeb is going to be slightly more efficient with that Nexus first. Let's continue walking you guys through that build order. Sorry, I got to make sure I point out the gas timings here. So right at about just after 1 minute on 17 supply, or just as you get to 18 supply. Oh, it is 18 supply, isn't it? Okay, 18 supply, double gas. So it's Nexus, so Pylon, Nexus, Gate, double gas basically as soon as you have the excess money without cutting into probe production. Should be around 18 supply. From there, you are going to drop a second Pylon because you don't want to get supply blocked and you really want to be constantly building probes. And then you go straight for a Cyber Core as soon as that gateway is finished. And from here, it's just non-stop probe production, powering all of that out. And you notice this is not a 2-gate opening. Only 1 gate, so very probe focused, very efficient. And immediately goes for a Stargate. Let's go back a little bit. Remember, the very first gas does go into an adept, goes into warp gate. The next 150 gas goes for the Stargate. But you do have to delay your mothership core just a little bit to get this Oracle out as quickly as possible. This is something you'll often see other players not cut as many corners as Neeb, especially on maps where there's a much wider ramp. And they'll actually delay their Stargate a lot. They will just slow this down for ages because they want to get out a mothership core. You know, they want to not open Nexus first. But Neeb is a big believer in get that Oracle across the map as soon as possible. And as a result, there are some games you'll find where a Zerg player is just a little bit unprepared, their Spore Crawlers aren't ready, and he does massive damage. But even when that doesn't happen, the Oracle is always a good choice. Before we talk about the Oracle, let's talk about the follow-up. 2 more gateways will go down right about 3 minutes 20, 3 minutes 30. Let's take a look at the exact timing. Here we go. So after the Stargate, you start the Oracle, non-stop probe production. You build oh, there was of course a pylon before that as well. So just in case you guys are the type to memorize your pylon timings, 40 supply, you go for that next pylon, and then you drop the 2 gateways after that. About 45 supply. 3 minutes 23, 30. And then immediately after those, you go for your Twilight Council. It's very important you start this now, because otherwise you won't have glaives ready by the time you want to be hitting that attack. So up until now, how many adepts have been built? Just 2. So it hasn't been consistent production out of the gateway. There's been 2 adepts built, but not absolutely non-stop. A 3rd adept will build though before Warp Gate finishes. So the aim here is for there to be 3 adepts. Warp Gate research finishes. Notice still no mothership core. Second Oracle will come out that's queued up immediately, and it can zap these Zerglings if they try to fight the adept. And then you just start warping in your adepts 3 at a time, non-stop, until that glaives upgrade finishes. I also like here that Neeb has gone for a Phoenix after the Oracle. Very popular to build a single Phoenix, shuts down drops, and of course can just hunt down Overlords, deny scouting information. He's then going to go for a 3rd base. If he could have secured this earlier, he would have gone for it. Look at that tab, guys. Still no mothership core. And he's just going to move out across the map with this adept timing. Well, actually he's moving out with just 7 adepts to start out. He's going to move up, do a little bit of a sort of fake pressure, and he shades backwards. And this is just a cute move that Neeb does. You don't need to do that where he says, oh, prepare for this. Nerchio builds an extra Evo chamber to wall off completely, and then says, oh, okay, you just went home. And he actually cancels it, goes out with his Zerglings, and then here comes the real attack. 12 adepts coming across this map. The Zerglings are going to spot it and go, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. And even though he does get that Evo chamber down, the adepts with their shade get over here so fast. Neeb just focuses that down, launches his way in. Unfortunately, the extra wall-off didn't get down in time for Nerchio. And even though this was a very cool way to respond on this map, which has a very narrow choke point at the front, Nerchio just wasn't quite ready. And, you know, he kind of just gets overwhelmed. Tries to Zergling counterattack, does decently with it, but is just getting hammered at home. So even though he kills 9 probes, he just cannot kill the adepts. Even whenever roaches get on top of them, they just kind of focus down the roaches and actually do great damage against them. And it just gets out of control. GG. Kind of terrible way to die here for Nerchio, because I think his response with the Evo Chamber is such a cool thing. I think it really has the efficiency to potentially destroy this. And it can be friggin' amazing. So guys, I talked about the build order there in terms of that. I haven't focused on the Oracle or talked about the Oracles much yet because I wanted to focus on the build. So let's go back and look at this a little bit more. Is there much infrastructure behind this? The answer to that, guys, is a resounding fuck no. We have a Forge with +1 only just starting. A Robo that's only just starting its 2nd unit. All it's built so far is... Oh no, it hasn't even built an Observer because he was under so much pressure he went Immortal first. So let's go back just a little bit. So what are you building as you're pushing out across the map with this pressure? So even before he's pushed out with the full 12 pressure, he's actually dropped down a Robo here at the 3rd base. If you want the exact build order notes, by the way, it's all just kind of automatically transcripted over on Spawning Tools, so go check that out. Oh, I haven't actually linked that for the guys watching live in chat. So I'll try to be a slightly less of a douchebag and copy that over to you guys right now. If you're watching on YouTube, scroll down, it's in the YouTube comments below. But yeah, you're going to go for that Robo. He's building a whole bunch of extra pylons because even gods get fucked up. Even if you can swim through land, you still will forget to build pylons once in a while, as has happened here with Neeb. He's going to drop that Forge as well, and no doubt, of course, just going to be going for things like a Templar Archives, extra gateways. Remember, only on 3 gateways this whole time, because the whole thing here is Neeb is like getting a lot of units off very little production. So if he has to kind of defend some big sort of all-in roach counterattack something, he really does need to drop an extra 4 gateways. And that would be kind of the next standard thing to drop with your minerals before a Templar Archives. If you feel very safe, you feel your opponent's not going to counterattack, of course, the earlier you can go for a Templar Archives and Archons or Storm, then the more efficient that's going to be. But it's all about, you know, get an observer out, see if you can deny some creep with your oracles or your adepts if they're still alive. Get immortals out, maybe add a second robo, maybe go for storm. All your standard Protoss versus Zerg things. So now let's go back a little bit and let's look at that first oracle and let's see how it went. Now I talked before about how Neeb does speed up that oracle, right? You know, it's a little bit, it's kind of the fastest generic oracle you can get off a nice fast expand build. It is going to hit just after 4 minutes, and we can see here what I was talking about. The Spore Crawler's not ready, but Nerchio's on point. He's got 2 queens. You never really go in versus 2 queens unless they're out of position. So if those queens were there, yeah, you come in, kill 2 drones and get out of there, but it's not worth just killing an extra drone to lose the oracle. The golden rule with oracle harass is if you're not killing an extra 8 workers, it's not worth sacrificing the oracle. And even if you are killing an extra 8, it's still kind of like, do I really want to spend that money and sacrifice it right now? Sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's actually not. Oracles are just such an important to preserve and keep alive. And once you get 2 oracles, it's fantastic, because then they can one-shot workers. So we're going to go take a look. Come on, Neeb, show us some of those kills. Because he actually does really well with these oracles, and he actually comes in and grabs these queens. Nerchio a little bit slow to react. An oracle beats a queen one-on-one, guys. So this is a fight you can choose to take if you think there's no support nearby or if you catch it off creep. And we see here that Spore Crawler in the back wasn't actually ready. Nerchio is relying on those 2 queens for the anti-air. And of course, this worked out really well for Neeb. This was more than a little lucky, right? He caught the queens off creep with no support, no connecting creep tumor, no Spore Crawler finished, got 9 kills. And this sets Nerchio back a long ways, and it's part of what makes the next pressure so game-ending. So there's always going to be the one person in Twitch chat. I don't know if they've actually, I'm not reading Twitch chat right now, but I'm sure there's someone who's just like watching this and they're like, yeah, but normally it's not going to do that much damage, so this isn't even a good build because Zerg's always ready for it because it's so popular right now. No, not really. This is a pressure, guys. Yes, it's a timing pressure. It works really well. Why does it work so well? Because you've gone double Oracle, you've forced anti-air. What is the one thing a Zerg wants to do against Oracle openings? It's don't take any drone losses, and then just go straight to Hydra Bane. Like, this is almost every Zerg's game plan against this. It's like, build next to no ground units, go to Hydra Bane, be ready for the later stage, because the Protoss can just scout everything and be very efficient, and that's kind of the situation that Zerg gets thrown into, right? So if you think about this from your opponent's perspective as a Protoss player, think about you're a Zerg. Whoa, the camera focuses. Okay, I think my hand was like freaking my camera out or something there. Okay, so the Zerg player is like, all right, I know my opponent is going to see literally everything because he has a floating disco ball of map hacks that can reveal my entire army while moving at lightning speed and basically just scouting whatever I'm doing. So as soon as a Protoss has an Oracle, a Protoss player, especially at high level, is going to be very unafraid. Why are they unafraid? Because they see everything coming. And this is why you'll often see a player open up an Oracle and then be like, you know what? I'm going to build a second Robo. Hell, I might even build a second Forge. That's not popular at pro play, but I've seen it quite a bit on ladder. So second Robo, I'm just going to go straight for Storm and warp in High Templar. And you'll look at their force, and they've got like 2 Sentries, a Zealot, and an Immortal. And it's like 9 minutes into the game, and you're like, that's all you have at your base? And the Protoss is just there like, yeah, well, if I see them building lots of units rather than droning up their 4 bases, then I'm going to be chrono boosting more Immortals. I'm going to be warping in round after round of units. Like, I'll be ready for that. But it's because the Oracle's so good at keeping tabs on what the Zerg is up to that Zerg players feel like it's very hard to then surprise the Protoss player. And PvZ from the Zerg side is a lot about surprising them, right? So Zerg players' response, and this is why we see this sort of play in the current meta at the high level, is Zerg wants to be greedy to keep up with that perfect, I don't need to build unnecessary defense play from the Protoss. The Protoss players will power very, very hard when they do an Oracle opening. So because Zerg players are playing greedier to respond to that, they're like, well, I'm going to be greedy to keep up with your greed. I'm going to go Hydra Bane. These sort of very surprising adept timings are so powerful because let's look at this from Nerchio's vision just very quickly. Let's go back to like a minute before this attack and look at it from his point of view, right? We're on Nerchio's vision. He's like, okay, cool, droning up. Let's ignore the fact that he's about to lose those 2 queens. Outside of that, what vision does he have? He goes, okay, you've gone a fast third off some oracles. These are all signs of fucking maximum greed, right? You know, I just want to drone as Nerchio. Check this out. He's got a roach warren for safety, in quotation marks, but he doesn't actually have any roaches out. He's got just 15 zerglings, and he sees these adepts and goes, oh, fuck! Throws down an evo chamber, wall off. Of course, losing the drones is an absolute disaster. But then he goes, oh, okay, the adept's just backed off. All right, he is just macroing. He's just trying to freak me out a little bit. And as Nerchio, what do you have on the production tab? You have upgrades, you have tech, you have drones, and in this case, a couple extra queens, because he did make that mistake. So you're really, you know, desperately trying to get wind of what's going on. And this also tells us something, right? If you're doing this sort of pressure, ideally, you're using this Phoenix to make sure there's no Overlord sitting here above the third base watching the move out. You've got to make sure you're denying scouting as the Protoss player to make sure you say, not only does this pressure, you know, it's good, it forces a response, let's try and have them have as little time to choose to make that response as possible. Let's fuck them up. So the Phoenix shutting down the Overlords is fantastic, of course. Where is that Phoenix? You can see here, look at this attack path from Neeb. He's queued it up to search literally everywhere for Overlords that might see this sort of move out. Not only that, but you can also have a few adepts out in front of your base, so that if you've got a whole bunch of adepts, they only see some of them. Here, it only looks like 7 adepts are moving out. There's actually another 4 or 5 adepts behind that. And even little things like this that just obscure what you're doing to the Zerg, and in their understanding of what's going on, can really just absolutely destroy them. So deny scouting. It's a fantastic pressure. And remember, at the end of the day, because you do have a fast third, you do have equal or close to equal workers, you do have your robo, your forge. As long as you're not just throwing the adepts away for nothing, you don't need to get damage done. This is something players always forget when they're going for a big pressure like this is, hey, wait a second, this is a big pressure, I need to do damage. And it's not, that's not the case. One of the best skills you develop whenever you're doing a big pressure is learning when to commit and when not to. Because even if your opponent's well prepared, you can always just back off with your units, not throw them away, and it'll be worthwhile. The big problem people have is they don't back off. They just throw the units into the meat grinder. They go, oh, well, that didn't work. This build's shit. And if you think about it, it's really quite obvious that, well, obviously, if you throw units into a bad position, it's kind of bad. But if you keep them out of the map, threatening, stopping your opponent from counterattacking, potentially using them on the defense, while still having your macro transition going, it's going to work out very well for you. All right. By the way, oracles. So you want to be floating in with these oracles as your adepts come in, right? Now, often what you can do, right, is there will be an area. The most exposed base about here, right? There's an area. And Neeb does this a little bit weird, right? Because his oracles are kind of stuck at the back. And this is very odd because he knows there's spore crawler coverage. So yes, with sick APM, he can come in from the edge, snipe a few drones, pull back, take a few spore shots. He can hold position over a gas and zap the gas drones. But 99% of the time with this pressure, you want these oracles to be down here with your adepts because you just engage not next to the spore crawler. And the queens and zerglings are going to come over. But imagine a whole bunch of zerglings come out. Sometimes banelings come out. You'll see like 4 or 5 banelings running down. Your oracles just fly in, turn on their lasers, and zap down most of the banelings before they even connect with the adepts. Your adepts can split against those banelings as well. The combination of adepts and oracles fighting queens, the queens just can't kill the oracles fast enough. So you've got to kind of combine the power of these 2 units away from the spore crawlers, where the queens suddenly aren't as great at being anti-air against the oracles because 1 or 2 volleys of the adepts and bam, the queen's gone. And suddenly, you know, these queens aren't big high damage units. Things get out of control. So generally you do want to do that. We see here Neeb kind of was pulling his oracles home to try and help defend the third, then realizes he doesn't need to. They finally come back in and they're the GG unit. Nerchio's just like, oh, fuck that. It's like, nah, I'm dead. Which he is. He was just caught way too off guard by that. All right, so finally, I know there's going to be the question from Zergies. Triple Helix was mentioning it in chat before. He's like, wait, so what do we do against this as Zerg? What do the Zerg players throw out to defend against this? You know, I don't know if I've done a daily on how to micro oracles, but I'll probably do that at another time. I don't think this is the time for that. Yeah, yeah. There's a whole bunch of complicated stuff to do with acceleration and stuff. I'll make a little video about that another day. I'm like, nah, I got to plan that out better because there's some real finesse to it, which I'd like to have set points on first. So anyway, ideally, what do you have against this, guys? Any big glaive adept pressure, you'd love to have roaches. Roaches are fantastic because they can actually take a few fucking spiked frisbees to the face without actually getting completely wrecked. So your roaches are really fantastic for fighting the adepts front on. Of course, Lingbane can still work very well against this, but you need to be very aware of this. So as a Zerg player, creep between your bases is super bloody important. I do think the creep out front is probably more important usually, but get creep between those bases because whenever you face this sort of pressure, you need to be able to get all your queens together very quickly so that you can focus down the oracles. And as long as you can do that, as long as your queens can sort of babysit and get between bases and keep the oracles out of the fight, then you're okay. And it's like just dealing with any other adept pressure. I've done videos on it before talking about defending different Protoss pressures where it's all about, you know, if they shade, you kind of chase the shade with half your units. But it's also about forcing the shade out early. If they're coming in and you're actually prepared, you should have enough units to jump on this immediately. You just say, oh, I'm just going to fucking surround it with Zerglings, crash the Banelings in before they can shade away. Easy. Or your roaches go out front and you force the shade when they're all the way out here on the edge of creep. And that way their shade only reaches to like there. So your new roaches coming out, or half your roaches that you split backwards to chase the shades, will be on top of them. And it makes it way more dangerous and more committed for the Protoss player to commit. But it's all about having enough Lingbane or enough roaches. Once your opponent gets to about 7, 8, 9 adepts with glaives or more, just Zerglings do not cut it. Unless you're true and you're a madman and you've got like 8 queens and 400 +1 melee Zerglings finished at this time, in which case, yes, with the perfect surround you can do it, but it's dicey as fuck. So yeah, generally it's just about having enough roaches and banes. In terms of how do you scout this, we talked about it before, guys. The Protoss player wants to deny scouting. Guess what? Keep scouting with those Zerglings. Look for these constant adepts warping in. If you've got Overlord speed, the big tell is going to be that very fast Twilight Council after the Stargate. That goes down right when that first Oracle has only just popped out. So if you see that, it's a big tell. If you see adepts being constantly warped in, this is one of your biggest tells just generally. So early Twilight Council is a big tell. Constant adepts making, that's also a big tell. And this is one of the things which, if you play like me, if you play like Nerchio here, you don't use Overlord speed, you don't really get that much vision in the base. This is one of your most important scouts. Zerglings at the front, looking around and saying, show me what you got. Because you've got to see how many adepts they're making. Adepts are always the scariest thing. And this is one of the most common things which is undervalued, I think, by a lot of Zerg players, is scout the front of the Protoss player and see what's there. Oh, he's warping in sentries. That's interesting. Okay. Oh, he has fuck all units. He's got like a sentry and 2 adepts, and he's clearly just focusing on teching up like a madman. Okay. Or you see, oh, there's 7 adepts. And even just seeing 7 adepts already, you should be building 8 roaches. Here is Nerchio. The reason Nerchio doesn't is because Nerchio messed up. He took those 8 drone losses, and he's just like, oh, shit. Shit. And he's like, okay, maybe I can be greedy and rely on the wall off. Maybe this will work. But then, you know, he cancels it. The next wave comes. He gets surprised by it. The wall off's not quite ready. Nerchio ends up down shit creek, okay? Also, the power of that first pressure, very quickly want to highlight that. The fake move out. Let's look at that one more time, guys. Watch the production tab. Remember, Zerg wants to be building just drones and then maybe roaches. This is a situation, unfortunately, Nerchio ended up in a lot in this finals where he left his roach horn just a little bit late, and as a result, he felt forced to build Zerglings. So 8 extra Zerglings is not insane, but every extra Zergling is definitely, you know, it's less drones, it's less economy. So even just having 4 less drones there against a fake pressure, when these Zerglings are almost useless at actually fighting the glaive adepts once they hit this number, it just kind of sucks for Nerchio. So the power of that fake pressure is really cool, and I love that adjustment by Neeb. If you find you're just learning the build, you're not as used to it, I probably wouldn't imagine you're doing that, because you might accidentally just get your adepts surrounded and killed. But I think it's just a really cool way to put pressure on, kind of be like, am I attacking you? Am I not attacking you? And then to follow up with the big wave. So once you get really practiced with the build, I would say it's something where you want to do that as much as possible. Throw the Zerg player off, rip him apart, and kick some ass. Few Zergs, just be a little bit more tight on your defense, get some creep between your bases. Make sure you don't delay the Spore Crawlers too long, especially if your opponent goes double Oracle. Nerchio is just trying to be a little bit greedy there, which is a very high level thing to do. It's a smart thing to do. He just cut the corner a little bit too tight and ended up getting tossed up on the curb. So yeah, I think this was you know, a good example of this build. It did, you know, way more damage than it normally does, but it is really cool. And remember, this isn't the only adept timing Zergs are afraid of. It's not the only adept timing you can do as a Protoss player. Hell, you can do a 14 gate adept timing off 3 bases where you're mining off just 3 gas geysers, and you're just like lol, 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 and you just make like 1 billion adepts. You even make a second warp prism. That's something we've seen stats do a little bit as well. So adepts are definitely the big, fast, surprising unit. They're so fantastic because Zergs want to rush to Hydra Baneling, and until you get critical mass of Hydras and Banes, those units are all very, very weak to adepts. Awesome sauce. So GG's. Thank you very much for hanging out, guys. Spawning tool link is down below in the comments. It's also there in Twitch chat. Thank you very much for joining me for today's show. Don't forget to hug a watermelon, kick a walrus, and of course, punch a cactus to the moon. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye and good night.